Anyway, I'd like to welcome everyone to the December Roundabout webinar. Our focus today is going to be on concrete, and the intent is that we're going to have two speakers today. Dan Wadley, as you can see here, is the chief of the KDOT's Bureau of Research. And the topic came up when he was speaking to us in August about pipes, and people started asking him some questions about concrete, and we decided that would be a good topic for another discussion. He had presented at the Kansas County Highway Association meeting about 1L concrete. And so people had some questions about that. So anyway, Mark's at least joined us. We'll see if he can get unmuted. And oh, I see him. Hi, Mark.
Hi. Sorry about that. I'm unmuted and I'm got video and I apologize for whatever happened. So
no problem. We got it going now. I'm just a little concerned about you being out in the middle of traffic, but I assume that's just a background.
That is a background, yes, ma'am.
Not where you really are. So Mark is a field engineer for the Missouri-Kansas Concrete Pavement Association, or paving or something.
Yes.
All right, I think we're gonna let, if you're okay, Mark, I'm gonna let you go first. I have your presentation ready, or you can share it, either one.
If you wouldn't mind sharing it, that would certainly make it easier for me. And
yep, I can do that. Figures. Sorry. There we go.
Okay, and I just wanted to we were going to talk about concrete, and I wasn't sure where all it might go, but just a couple general things about concrete. I thought there might be a little discussion about maybe the newer, the type 1L cements, but I thought in order just to kind of walk us up to that point, if we can take a look at the next slide, when we think about concrete, concrete's a big deal. If we could get to the next slide, or is it?
Are you seeing that? Did you want the one on concrete or cement?
Slide number 2, it should say concrete at the top.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I had that. Figure out how to get that. How did I move one slide? Now I can't move it all. Goodness. Will this work? And of course, I have everybody at KUTC watching. I need. Okay. Here we go. Let me try this. There. There we go.
There we go. And yeah, we're going to talk about concrete. And concrete it's really a big deal. When you think about it, it's actually the second most used substance in the world following water. So concrete's a big deal, not only nationally, but internationally around the world. And the makeup of concrete, its basic ingredients are rock, sand, cement, and water, and that's the mix that you used maybe when you were a child and on the farm and made up a little concrete in the wheelbarrow for a fence post or whatever, and that's what you used. And as time went on, and we saw in the 70s and 80s, there were some supplemental cementitious materials added, like fly ash and slag, and then admixtures came along because of different needs and where we needed the concrete and what we wanted to try to do. So water reducing admixtures in order to keep the water cement ratio lower, air entrainers, chemicals in order to entrain air to give the concrete durability when it's exposed to the elements, depending on haul times and different things, different admixtures to control the set, whether to an accelerator to accelerate the set and curing of the concrete, or something to retard, slow down the set, those things. And the purpose of those admixtures is just to control the properties of the fresh and the hardened concrete. And with the next slide, it kind of brings us to the key ingredient that makes the concrete, or allows the concrete to get hard and gain its strength, is the cement. And actually, cement is made up of the ingredients in cement are limestone. There's some clay, iron ore, and then after all those go through their process and the clinker is produced, as the finish milling is done, some gypsum is added, and the gypsum is added in order to control the sets of concrete or of the cement. Probably in the late 90s, there was some work worldwide, and certainly through the AASHTO publications, to allow up to 5% of ground limestone to be ground in with the clinker. And then over the last few years in the United States, specifications were developed, research was done, and really the cement that we have today is a Portland limestone cement, and it has up to 15% limestone ground into the mix. And so the question is, if we go to the next slide, is what's new, or what's happening, or why? Why the work towards adding more limestone into your cement, to kind of reducing that? And probably the main driver, and I know this webinar its purpose isn't to debate whether carbon concerns are real or imaginary or what they are, but certainly that is a driving force. And carbon giving off a CO2 during the production of cement is a concern, and the cement industry is working to minimize that. And so some of the actions that get taken when we're doing that is to use the additional limestone, like we looked at, increasing from 5% up to a maximum of 15%, using increased amounts of the fly ash or the slags, those supplementary cementitious materials. And so if you think about that, you can take a look at your concrete mix that you use today, and it may have the up to 15% limestone. And then if you add in maybe up to 25 or even higher amounts of supplemental cementitious materials, the concrete mix that you have today really only has maybe 50 to 60% of the amount of true Portland cement in the mix that your grandfather used out on the farm. There was lots of research that was done with the Portland limestone cements, and looking at the different characteristics of the cement, and the different values, and that's kind of where they honed in on where the right amount of Portland or of Portland of limestone should be added. What we're finding is in some of the research or some of the documents that come out today, the questions are arising. Well, was the research done using Portland limestone cement compared to Portland cement, but did it include these additions of the supplemental cementitious materials, and certainly at the higher amounts? Because what gets affected when you add these supplementary cementitious materials and then the additional limestone, strength is affected, and the rate of strength gain is affected. We are seeing some scaling that we're in some of our concrete surfaces. It's in some of our mixes around some of our locations. We do see a higher water demand with the PLC with Portland limestone cement than we do in our regular cement, and then when you add all of that together, the thing that may not have been researched as much is, well, if these things are affected, what about the admixtures that are used? Are people using more or different amounts of admixtures? So how does that affect the concrete strength? And I think what we heard from the very beginning is that, oh, just look at our Portland limestone cement, just like it's a type 1. We're finding that in practice, when you include the changes that are being done with the amounts of admixtures, or the dosage, let me say, of admixtures, and the amount of the supplemental cementitious materials that are used, we're not seeing just exactly the same results. And so there is, and that kind of goes to that last box, there is a learning curve. One of the things, probably one of the better comments that I heard, at least it kind of stuck with me anyway, is that back in the 80s, when fly ash was added to concrete mixtures, there was a learning curve. There was a learning curve that we all, the industry, went through to figure out just exactly how to use this material to get the benefits or get the characteristics of the concrete we wanted. And likewise, we're going to have to continue to work through that learning curve using the Portland limestone cements, using the increased supplemental cementitious materials, and using the changed dosages of our admixtures. We're going to have to go through a learning curve to figure out exactly where we need to be in order to get the performance in all times of the concrete that we want. I'm certainly not saying that we're seeing poor performance everywhere that we've used the Portland limestone cements, but we have seen some things that that at least justify that we need to continue learning and figuring out some more of the details. And Dan can probably speak to some of those things maybe a little bit better.
Thank you, Mark. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to what Dan wants to share, has to share? I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully when Dan goes to share, he'll have better luck than I was there. Yay, very good.
All right, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to echo a lot of what Mark just said and run real fast through a little bit more background on basically everything he just said. This is kind of coming at us because of the worldwide use of this product, which we're not a huge contributor by comparison to some of the other sectors of the market, but we are a fairly, we're not an insignificant contribution. these are kind of looking at the emissions metric, million metric tons of CO2 for just cement production worldwide compared to everything global warming potential wise. Obviously, the trend is going up. And the thing that is trying to be curbed is this peak rate as we approach the carbon neutrality conversation. So they're trying to curb the man-made global warming potential from all products. The way that this shakes down for us right now is 1L cement falls into that category of the things that can be done right now with improved practices on immediate changes, which basically focus in on the clinker production process because that's the first step. There will be more down the road, but right now, this is the world that we're looking at: the energy efficiency, alternative fuels, clinker substitutes, and that's where 1L was born. We weren't too concerned about it. We looked at it about more than 10 years ago. However, we only looked at the handful of products that were on the market at that time, and we didn't do any huge scale projects with it, which I think, like Mark points out, we'll be doing some of that going forward. It is a blending of raw limestone back in with the clinker feed, and then it gets subsequently ground down. The concept being that you get the same strength by finer grind, which is generated through more nucleation sites and better crystal growth throughout the paste. So that effectively gives you particle packing theory, a denser paste. Like Mark said, we have seen slower bleed rates, if anything, some issues with scaling, especially where surfaces are overworked or have been blessed. Increase for plastic shrinkage cracking if curing is not, a good curing regime is not followed. Some cements do exhibit different strength gains, especially early, most predominantly early, before 7 days. We've seen an increased frequency in low breaks, but as we talked about in some of the other previous discussions, that's not all to do with the cement. A large part is due to water that's being added back at the job illegally or not controlled at all during the batching. And so it kind of leaves us with this situation where water control and curing are very important when using a 1L cement. This is kind of what he's talking about in terms of a learning curve and potentially a change in practice. It's showing up now in the literature quite a lot more in terms of bleed rates, how it's in this case half on this example, but that varies by type. The broader conversation extends to the 1L cements are the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's coming, which includes a lot more novel cement types, blended cements. You got these, basically, there's a lot of things out there being developed right now, and as soon as we can get samples of these things, we will begin evaluating them immediately. But there's just a lot of stuff out there. This is one of them, LC3, which is essentially, I wouldn't say a brand new type of cement, but taking 1L cement even further, right? You're cutting it with almost a new blend. So these things are all on the horizon for us. But what we really do need to do is take a step back and think about, yeah, we're going to do our lab evaluation, but we need to do some small scale and some large scale tests with those products along with our contractor friends to basically figure out what do we need to change specification wise, what do we need to change in our habits to be able to make those products work. And that's going to be the challenge. That'll probably include some new tests. It'll include changes to spec and changes to habit, like I said. So it's going to be a all hands on deck activity. I'm not too worried about it for Kansas, but we have really good associations in this state. We have a lot of people who are plugged into this and working on it. We literally got done with, we've had several meetings this week with working on this LCTM grant that we applied for, which is the Low Carbon Transportation Materials Grant. We're meeting with the feds next week to try to understand more about the rules on how that rolls. And that will be how we start this process because it'll be coming in the next year, which will include very likely EPDs for mix design, plant specific, mix specific EPD documents for all the plants in Kansas for concrete and asphalt as part of the bid process uh, in order to start establishing baseline thresholds for Kansas and surrounding states. A lot of the states applied for this and got it, and so it's just sort of a question of how are we going to roll this thing out. But this work will help us both pay for and incentivize using some of these new novel cements, give us time to work with them, do pilot projects at different scales to try to rapidly deploy what's out there. The good news is that Kansas is already at least 10 years ahead of everybody else, or we're in good shape as far as our specifications go. And our markets are strong. We've already been using the 1L, so we're already in really good shape. We just got to continue that work and get ready, start working on these other new ones too. So with that, open for questions. Anybody's got any or would like to share anything?
Yeah, this is the roundabout portion where we're more of a roundtable discussion. I'm sure some people out there have some questions or some concerns, things that you maybe have had issues with about 1L or really any type of concrete. We've got some great experts here that hopefully can assist you or just share good or bad things that have been happening. So open for that now.
This is Justin Mader, Sling County. Can you hear me?
Great. Yes,
Yeah.
thanks, Justin.
Okay. Yeah, my always concern was just the and you kind of touched base on it. Getting this information on how to do things differently to contractors and small batch plants. And I think the contractors that do KDOT work are eventually going to start figuring it out. But your smaller local contractors, and as well as your smaller batch plants, I think it's going to be a long process, and I just don't know how to get everybody on board with that. So I mean that's just always been my biggest concern, and I think it's also educating the locals, the local government, cities and counties, who are dealing with smaller contractors for, let's just say flat work, doing, concrete pavement out at the yard. Getting that knowledge out there so they know what questions to ask for the contractor and batch plants, I think is going to be critical.
Yeah, and I think the current plan is to use all of these associations, just like we are doing right now today, to basically talk through all this stuff. With the LCTM grant, we'll have a little bit of money to basically set up some, I'm not going to say public outreach, but like additional discussion forums, some trainings basically to talk about EPDs, to talk about these changes. We're essentially going to try to make the EPD requirement a bid item that we pay for. So it's not going to be, an unrewarded activity. And so that'll help take a little bit of the financial burden off of, small time producers, big time producers, doesn't matter. We'll pay for it. But it definitely will have forums that will explain all of the steps. We'll go through, into the minutia as far as anybody wants to go about these different topics. Again,
Yeah.
Kansas, or at least KDOT's already been using SEMs for a long time. So our spec is as good as it can be right now in terms of a performance-based spec, in that we already utilize most of these things that some states don't use at all, like fly ash and slag.
Mhm.
The future of 1L cement is going to heavily rely on slag to make it work as we go to higher and higher substitution rates. So that'll be the in-between before some of these other things start kicking off. And that's the part that, we're going to, KDOT will work with our local producers to start vetting that stuff as soon as possible so that we have a path forward on whatever's available in our market. And then, yeah, we'll just adjust specs accordingly. And once the specs are adjusted, we'll have classes. And
Mhm.
when we get to some of these other really novel cements, that's when the game's going to get exciting, because it literally will be a different material at that point to some degree. And so those will be a little bit more of a dramatic change. Those will be different. So those,
Right.
like Mark was talking, when we're down into the 40% or 50% conventional, what's left of Portland cement, those will be a little different. But, we just treat it like any other engineering thing. We just figure it out, do the science, do the testing, do the scale up, figure it out, go do it.
Is once you start, use like, just let's just use a slag. Is supply going to be an issue?
Yeah, supply is going to be a fun thing, because everybody's market's different. I mean, and especially as the LCTM grant kicks off across the country, different states that have not been using SEMs as heavily as we have, they're going to start pulling more of that market share, or pulling more of that product. And it could create, it could create a rush. I don't know how that's going to work out, but, the flip side of that same coin is that same demand is already starting to expand the growth of reclaimed ash sites. So going in and, opening up old deposits of fly ash and reclaiming it, reprocessing it, regrinding it, blending it, cleaning it up. And so as there's 200 years worth of supply laying around of that stuff. So it's just a matter of going and getting it and processing it. So, you know, we're back to waiting on the railroad to bring us the goods.
Yeah. So as the cement keeps getting more and more complicated, I'm assuming the price of that is going to keep going up, or not necessarily?
I mean, I don't know. Megan might be able to. I don't see the price of it super changing right at the very beginning. Some of this other stuff's probably not going to be as sought after, so it could be potentially cheaper.
Okay.
But I would expect prices to remain fairly stable. I don't
Okay.
know. Megan might be able to salt and pepper that conversation just a little bit, but
I don't touch that with a 10-foot pole, Dan.
okay.
No, but I think your assessment's correct. I think pricing will remain stable for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. I mean, the global warming potential thing, right? It's a good plan. It's a good plan for the planet, but it's also backed by, um, you know, incentive on profits too. So it's not like, it's not like anybody's being forced down this road. It's a mutually agreed upon path. So I think we'll have supply. We're lucky, Kansas is in good shape where we're at in the country. It just, we're kind of we are at the mercy of the railroad to get materials in. So in that regard, there may need to have a conversation, which we're already, we are having that conversation on other fronts. But in terms of getting supply around the country to be able to do this, but I'm very confident that that will be sorted out as we work through this process.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, if you've got, as people start to have questions or concerns, email away and we'll start building a list of what we need to do. This grant is going to go pretty fast, and so we'll be working on this thing pretty soon. So next year is going to be interesting.
Can you, what's the grants?
The LCTM,
goal?
Low Carbon Transportation Materials Grant, it's basically to incentivize the use of lower carbon emission cement products. And so it essentially is trying to help states that don't already have a performance-based spec to go that route. It'll pay for the cost differential of using those new products. And then if you are in different quartiles, 40%, top 20%, you'll get a little bit of an incentive back. It's like 2%. It's a very small amount, but it's just sort of an incentive to help the states move along away from prescriptive specs like Mark was talking about. Your mix designs from 60, 80 years ago where it says put this much in, this is the only mix you can use, to opening up the mix design field for producers to basically innovate and come up with whatever mix design that they want to do that still meets the requirements. So for Kansas, we have the strength and permeability requirements, and it's open field on what materials and what sources you want to use to achieve that mix. So it's a performance-based spec. That's the goal of getting all the other states to have that same type of similar specification. Use SEMs, basically. That's step one. So we're already a long ways down that road.
If I can just add just a minute to at least a part of what I understood Justin's question had to do with, kind of getting the word out to everyone. And you know what, we all kind of bear that responsibility because and like this is being recorded. So who in your circle in the business wasn't here today, and if you can make them aware that this is out there to take a look at, and you know what, Dan and I or anybody may not have provided the answer to every single question, but we probably provided a little bit of information and provided enough where people can ask the right questions to figure out. So, we all kind of bear that. There are opportunities through the local, through the LTAP, through DOT. I know they have trainings and different things. All the trade organizations have trainings and opportunities, but making sure that we share those opportunities with those that might not be in attendance, so that they can be at least informed, so they can ask the questions that need to be asked and learn more.
Do we have other comments or questions? Feel free to unmute or send a chat. I don't know if you can raise hands at this. I always forget which version we have, but if not, just a reminder that this is recorded. All of our roundabouts are now on YouTube. If you look for the KUTC, I believe, is our YouTube channel. If you need help finding that, just send me an email at nelda.buckley@ku.edu. We'll get it to you. But then moving forward, we will be having these, the intent is to continue. I have some ideas in my head, but I'd really like to discuss topics like this that are of interest to cities and counties. So put a link to those to our YouTube channel in the chat. Anyway, I'd like to address topics that you want to hear about, not just what I want to talk about or what I can find. So if anybody has some ideas, share them today or send me an email. We need to get some topics lined up for the next year.
And Justin, I mean, I'm super, like, whatever we need to do to communicate with the small time producers, I want to do that. I want to make sure that whatever we do, they understand it and they understand all the aspects of it so that they can make decisions about scaling up for their business or not, so forth and so on, because all of those conversations help to inform, not only how we craft a spec, but basically making sure that we got a good level playing field for everybody, and that we're not, we want to be able to make this product everywhere in the state and not lose anybody.
No, sure. Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I think a lot of the contractors, the smaller contractors, it's going to be a hard learning curve. I know we had some flat work done by a local contractor, and he had to take out probably a third of the product he installed because it cracked within 12 hours. And, nobody really understands why. I've got some ideas, but, when you have to tear out product you just installed, that should be an education, so.
Well, if you can share those things with me as they come along, I'll add it to the library list of things that we've been tracking too. I mean,
yeah,
I think that's an honest conversation that we're just going to have to try to figure out.
Right.
Especially right now, immediately, like not only looking forward, but like right now, what do we need to do to help everybody get sorted out of this thing? So,
do we need to do anything different with jointing, like our joining plan?
I would say err on smaller than bigger in terms of 10
Right. So
foot,
that's
10 to 15 foot.
Your normal practice, so just
Yep.
don't push the limits.
I think this is where my interest in work that John Keverin's doing at UMKC with the use of resistivity for the predicting early the correct windows for saw cutting time.
Mm-hmm.
Him and Dan Zollinger down in Texas, they have done a lot of work on this, and he's created this little device that basically lights up green when it's the right saw time and red when it's not, when it's too early or you're late. And I have not been able to get hooked up with him on doing a full scale project yet, but I'm really excited about that device because I think we're going to need that when we start dealing with some of these more novel cements, because it'll make it, I'm not going to say dummy proof, but it basically gives us a much clearer indication of the correct time to saw. And
Mm-hmm.
that'll help a lot with cracking, both cracking and activated joints.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I think our issue was something else because they got on it. I mean, it was within 12 hours and we had a good joining plan. And I mean, I think they wetted the base. I don't think they wetted it enough. I mean, I think you got to do more than just sprinkle some water on top.
mm-hmm. And I would say that's consistent with everything that we're seeing, is that we're just seeing all the bad habits basically, they're showing up more. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're going to have to really stick to the good habits and maybe even make some new good habits.
Yeah. Is curing compound, because it's the curing compound, does any of that need to change? I mean, is there some curing compounds out there that probably that aren't as
Yes.
effective and shouldn't be used? Because that could have been another issue, is it just didn't.
Yes, most curing compounds, most finishing aids are 90% water. In fact, they almost all are. So they're essentially water.
Uh-huh.
And then there really weren't, you know, whether you call them evaporation retarders or whether they're finishing aids, you're blessing it with water. And some of that was a holdover from KDOT spec from 15 years ago when we still floated in the tining. And so it was supposed to be uh, a way to slow down evapotranspiration before you floated in the tines. But now that we saw cut the tining in, just get the burlap down and cover it for our jobs. For flat work, it's a little different, but yeah, you got to get some kind of, there are different, the monomolecular film stuff that's supposed to be the true evaporation retarders. Those will help you more on the flat work side because you can't get out there and you can't burlap it. But
Right.
um, definitely the time of day that you place the concrete at night would be better than early in the morning when you have that rapid shift
Right.
in relative humidity, if they can do
Yeah.
it at night.
Yep. And they did that. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yep.
I'm
Those
wondering
are,
the plastic. Yeah, we should have. I mean, and again, I'm just always trying to think of, what do we do different moving forward? Um, and again, this is, more with flat work and not bridge work, but require them to maybe do the plastic sheeting if it's in burlap.
but I think that's a great place to begin making progress on the conversation because we're going to eventually have to tie together more of the flat work with the bridges and paving work because the habits tend to kind of come and go and overlap a little bit. You know, we see a lot of guys out on bridge decks that are trying to turn bridge decks into Walmart floors, and it's like you're killing it.
Uh,
Stop, strike it off and be done. Don't overwork it. So there's habits that need to change that maybe should stay on the inside world and don't go to the outside world, but yet put the habits with the right thing that we're making. And
right.
that would be a great improvement. And
I
that
think
helps the small
it,
time guys a lot too, because then the small time producers aren't constantly getting harangued by, you know, bad habits that they can't control.
yeah, I think it would be helpful to have like a very simple, one page, best practices, that, the local governments like me, I'm not a materials guy. I'm not an expert in this by any means, but something that we can have that we can talk about to the contractor at a pre-con. Said this is what I'm going to require. And I mean, you can even put it in your, the back of your specs to say, okay, this is what it's going to be. Um, so we've got something to go off of since we're not experts. We don't know. And the contractors, they think they're experts. And we don't have a choice but to just believe them.
So you're thinking, what would your, uh, in terms of all products, flat work, paving approaches,
I,
like,
I would think so, yeah.
or
You
just
know,
general?
right, because there's more programs out there to where, KDOT's not involved. Even like the local bridge improvement program. You're building bridges out there, without KDOT involved. And so therefore you may or may not have that expertise out there. I mean, hopefully you've got some inspection, you're gonna have some inspection work out there, hopefully. But we're we're kind of at the whim of the contractor.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I will
And
see.
I'm thinking like real common sense, straightforward best practices. And then, you put it in your specs, you have it at your pre-cons, like, hey, this is what's going to be required.
Or if nothing else, just things for the inspector to watch.
Right.
There are some local municipalities that follow KDOT spec. There's others that don't. Some have their own. Like there are a lot of different specifications out there. But
Just because that spec is in the plans,
yeah.
it doesn't mean we understand it.
Well, if there's common things that you're hearing that are confusing that people are not understanding, also send that to me
Okay.
because I'm I'm foreseeing some rewrites of our stuff in general anyway, but we can dovetail that all in.
All right, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Great discussion there. Anyone else have thoughts, questions? All right. Well, Mark, Dan, any final thoughts before we end?
I appreciate everybody's time and feedback.
Thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.
All right. See you later.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nelda.
Sure. Thank you.